This video series is sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy esports such as League of Legends. You can bet on LCK. You can enter tournaments for NALCS, EULCS, LPL. People win tens of thousands of dollars every week. Something like $300,000 was won last week. So if you want to play that, go to the link in the description below. Now, TSM, even though for the majority of this split, the summer split of NALCS, have not been top of the league, people like CLG have been top of the league, it was always expected that they would rise to there eventually, as they did in week 5. And that, you know, the old saying that form is temporary, class is permanent. Since overall they looked like a better team, they had the best player in the league, Bjergsen. In the past split, they'd had times where they had the best shot calling, and the expectation was that in terms of form against the overall field, they would have the best form, and therefore they would eventually rise and become the best team. But over the last couple of weeks, they've been in a crisis where they've gone 1-3. Their only win was the first of those 4 games against TDK, who'd only just gotten their Korean players. And even then, TDK played well above the odds of what you'd expect. TSM actually looked like they could have lost that game, but won anyway. Then they lost to Gravity, who now are the top team in the league, but then were still a team that was sort of hanging around the 3rd, 4th, playing the spoiler every now and then. They lost to Team 8, who were a team not even expected to be a good team. Occasionally they've had bright spots where they won the odd game and Neon's gone crazy. But this is a team that definitely TSM were expected to beat. And then they lost to Liquid, who, yes, admittedly, individually is a strong team, but has shown a lot of problems from mid to late game against top-level teams at times, losing out to teams like Gravity. And so this is a game where it should have at best probably been a 50-50. If anything, you would have given a slight edge to TSM as the split had been going on, that they should have overall been the better team. And this is where in the past they had been able to shine and they would have been able to beat the players in Liquid. So obviously something's going wrong here. Going 1-3, possibly could have even gone 0-4. You can see that there's some issues. So since they have this reality TV show, follows them around, TSM Legends, when the episode came out, much as with all TSM, or in fact with all reality TV shows, even Chasing the Cup with C9 and CLG, and then the original Game Cribs with TSM, people dissect it and they try to draw conclusions from it. And often the conclusions they draw, just because, unfortunately, kind of the base level that people consume this material as, looking at the personas and the personalities of the people, is they then draw conclusions about people. So people were suggesting Bjergsen's like toxic, or he's too argumentative, and is Loco a proper coach, and does he do a good job there? And then obviously one of the key pivotal moments in the show quite early on is that Reginald comes in and he sort of says, like, listen, I'm gonna, like, initially it's him debating on the Team 8 game over the picks, like, I don't think these picks are very good, I think even the way it was played was wrong, to then becoming like, right, I'm going to step in, I'm going to take over the team as the acting coach, I'm going to sort of take LocoDoo's job, he's going to be pushed off to one side, and everything's going to run through me. I'm going to have picks come to me, I'm going to make choices about things, I'm going to lead the discussions, I'm going to set the topics, I'm going to set the kind of even the tempo of the discussion, what's allowed to be discussed, I'm going to directly confront people over issues, and so this in itself is now a topic to be discussed. And so there's a lot to break down here. And luckily, we don't just have that reality TV show, which obviously is edited. And so some things maybe aren't in there, maybe even some snippets of conversation that would have provided some extra context. But luckily, Reginald did some longer posts. I've actually always wondered on stuff like that. Why not just do a post like that on your own website and then get hits to your own website and have it be an official statement like a blog or vlog? But oh well, whatever. That's just me. What do I know about media, right? So he did these longers where he tried to expand upon what he thought about what was going to happen with him taking over for LocoDoo, his opinions on LocoDoo and his future in the team, because obviously people are going to worry, well, if you take over for Loco as the head coach, is Loco on his way out? Is he being kicked out? And he addressed a lot of this. And so since we have his words on paper as well, not even in video where it's very easy to misspeak or just to not articulate what you're thinking in your head ideally, it's very difficult in words to get out what you're thinking. Because we have his words here written, well, he had time to go back, rethink them, take out this bit, pause for a second, think how it's to phrase the next thing. So we can go over this line by line, not literally line by line, but I'm going to take some of the segments. I'm going to address some of them as a way to structure a discussion about TSM's coaching, LocoDoo's role in it, and Reginald coming in this sense. And then it'll also, as a subtopic, have stuff in there about Bjergsen, him being the shot caller, what his role within the team is, does he have an attitude? We'll address it all. So let's start out at the very top, where he said, this is Reginald, I've been reading a lot of comments on Reddit, and I felt like this is an important topic to talk about. I believe the community members are looking at the situation in the wrong way. Now, regardless of whether the community are looking in the wrong way, just a different way to Reginald, I do have to say, let's start this out by saying props to Reginald for actually attempting some level of transparency here and to kind of open a discussion on this topic, even if in saying that everyone else is wrong and he's going to come in and set you right. That's not really much of a discussion, but at least he's willing to put forth a perspective, give his opinions, and also try and show people, at least from his perspective, what he genuinely thinks is going on behind the scenes and how he thinks of the team, and give you a different perspective than maybe you saw just on the reality TV show or from interviews or from seeing the team play. The reason why I say props for that is because it's obviously interesting. It allows videos like this to exist where I have more information. I could make the video anyway, but I'd have to speculate greatly and mainly just off the reality TV show. Whereas now that I have some of his words here and his actual thoughts unedited, no editor getting in the way to decide this looks sexier, it's not as interesting, even though it might be actually more apt to the discussion. Because of that, as a result, we're getting a look behind the scenes to a degree, or at the very least a look into Reginald's mind on the topic and what some of the other members think, that we not only wouldn't get otherwise, but he's not obligated to do this. And he is in no sense required to do it. Like he doesn't have to do it. And there's no reason why he should do it. No, and he's doing it because he wants to show people a different perspective. So I got to give him props for that. I like that. I wish more teams would do that. I mean, I would love to know publicly, what does Jack think about all the problems with Incarnation, bringing High back? Is that a long-term solution? Shotgun? We don't get to know that stuff. I'd love to know really as weeks go on and CLG has their feelings. I'd love Hotshot to come out at that point and not just say vague things like, I'm going to be more integrated into the process in the future, this will never happen again. I'd rather he specifically came in and said, like, yeah, this is what I think of this player here, and this is how the relationship was with the coach, and here's what I want to change about it, and here's some things I think about this player, where people might be saying my star player is toxic. Imagine that, eh? But here's what I actually think of his role within the team and how it makes sense, the dynamic to me at least, and here's what I want to foster. We don't ever get that usually, so props to Reginald for actually coming forward to that. We'll start with that. Now, on the topic of LocoDoo as the coach, we have to start right away with something that Reginald says. So he says, Loco's authority is not above the players. His job is to facilitate healthy discussion among the team members for us to fix our problems and improve. Now let's just start with the first sentence there. Loco's authority is not above the players. That is ludicrous for the concept that he is the head coach. He is the coach. He's not the analyst. He's not someone suggesting things. He's not someone bringing data forward and saying, here's something to base your decision making off anyway. He is the coach. He decides the identity of the team. He decides the strategy of the team. He decides the tactics of the team. Now to point out just very briefly what those are in case someone's lost with the terminology, because it's going to be necessary as we discuss this now. Identity of the team is like knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your players and the unit as a whole when you put them together. This player might be very strong at one specific thing, but when put into the unit with the other players, the totality, the unit might not be as strong in that area. That might actually be a weakness. So there's the strengths and weaknesses of the team, the makeup of the team. There's the style overall that they're going to play. That's going to lead into strategy. Strategies are going to be the overall approach of how you'll play, the sort of speed you'll play, the kinds of approaches you'll have, kind of the logic behind what your strengths will be in the game, how you'll veer away from weaknesses, how you'll build into your strengths and build off them and make those focal points. Then you go into tactics, because the reason I'm making this point is because strategy and tactics are often confused. Tactics are the very specific, piece by piece, detail by detail, ways you're going to implement that strategical approach into the game. So a very specific comp, a very specific way of this player playing, a very specific order in how you follow up here, in who's going to be front line, who's going to be the back line, what the interaction is going to be like with engaging, when we're going to take those objectives. The strategy might be, are we a team that fights around dragon a lot? Are we a team that's going to be using disengage? Then you're going to go to the specific tactics. Here's the comp that's going to allow us to engage. Here's how we're going to set up to take dragons and set them up for later. Here's how we're going to control the vision. Whatever the area is that you start with the identity, then you implement the strategical approach that makes sense with that. Then you have the tactics below that. And this hierarchy is very difficult to understand for players because they're so often caught in just the tactical aspect of what they specifically did. Then there's the strategical aspect where they might have done something which to them in their moment might have made sense there, but the coach needs to always be on top of them, not only to have the specific tactics, the approaches to how you're going to do what you want in place that are going to work, but then he needs to make sure people are on the same strategical page where they understand what overall we're going for here. Even if that seemed like the correct play to you now, if it didn't work into our overall strategical approach, and in fact it might even have hindered what you're eventually trying to accomplish, such as backing when you actually want to set up for a dragon later on, since that was your whole approach to the team comp, then you've got issues. That's why the coach needs to be on top of this. He needs to be the one who has the final say, because he's the one who has the overview of the game that the player in many aspects will not be able to have and shouldn't have. He's supposed to be focusing on his job and then simple areas in which he interacts with specific players, maybe not even all the players. Then you go to the team's identity. Again, something might be right for this player in this instance, but it might not A, fit into the strategical approach, and then it might not B, play to the identity of the team. You might be trying to play away from the strengths of the team and into a weakness, even though to that one player, it might seem like, well, this is a strength of mine. So again, that's why the coach has to be in control of all this, because he has to have the authority at all these stages to have the ultimate final say. Because he has the overview, he understands this approach, and he is going to be the guy who lives and dies on the results. No matter what owners say or what players say, whether they try to make excuses or say, oh, we don't blame him for that, these people should be, to a degree, blamed for it. I mean, I always make this case when I talk about coaching in all games, okay, that part of the reason why, in a way, you should be blamed if your team loses a lot of games and you're the coach and you decided the approach, is because, yeah, your approach might actually be right, but first of all, maybe it doesn't fit the personnel you have, and maybe it couldn't. Maybe you're coaching the wrong type of team. There have been examples where brilliant coaches played for teams that weren't the right type of coach. A great NBA example for you would be the coach Rick Adelman. Now, this guy is a phenomenal coach, one of the greatest in history. People don't know it because he hasn't, as a coach, won NBA championships. But he's been to finals, he's repeatedly been to playoffs. He's the kind of guy where, give him almost any team, well, within reason, has to have some decent players, obviously, and he'll probably be able to get you a playoff seed. He could probably get you 45, 50 wins. Now, give him an exceptional team of the type that his coaching strengths suit and of the style and identity he wants to play, now you'll have one of the best teams maybe ever, and one of the best teams in the NBA certainly. But if you give him a team where it has some decent players but it's totally the wrong approach, those players wouldn't buy into his system. Then actually no, they'll be decent, but they'll never go beyond a certain level. So in that sense, you probably should fire him from that job. If he'd have known, he shouldn't have taken that job, because he's not right for that job. Meanwhile, a lesser coach but who fits the style and identity of that team might actually be more successful within that concept. So the point I'm making here is that's why Loco should be allowed to set the identity, the strategy, and the tactics of the team. And yes, take in discussion, take in suggestions, have some feedback with people so you can see his own ideas where he wants them to be, but maintaining this overall structure, because ultimately he should live and die by the results of the team. If he's not the right coach, then regardless of whether he's a good coach in a general sense or for other styles of players and teams, he should not be the TSM coach. Now, I don't know if that's the case. That's something we're going to get into now. So that's why he has to have the final say. That's very important. If you don't give him the final say and then you blame him for when things are going wrong with the identity of the team, the strategy of the team, and tactics team, and it's not even what he implemented and what he wanted to be that case, how can you then blame him? You haven't allowed him to do what his job is, and yet you're then blaming him for the people who are he's responsible for not doing their jobs. The hierarchy only works if every stage has the correct level of responsibility relative to where they are in the hierarchy. It's also the case that if LocoDoo doesn't have final say and he's only allowed to promote discussions and keep them healthy and facilitate discussions, how does this discussion ever end? If someone like Bjergsen or someone who just disagrees wants to keep the discussion going forever, they can just choose to never take on board what the other person said, never acquiesce their position, because they're all equal, remember, within the discussion, keep it going for as long as they want, and just win by battering other people down, or make other people just want to quit, or even make other people like, we don't logistically have time right now. We have to go play this game right now in 5 minutes. So we've got to come to some conclusion. We can't just all think 7 different things and hold those positions and never let up. So in that scenario, you'll even get to situations where, yes, Bjergsen's going to get his way because he wouldn't give up on a certain thing that, listen, might even be the right thing, especially for him personally and his perspective on the game. So because he doesn't give up on it, he could essentially force stalemates, which in the end have to be resolved to some degree in his area, because if they're not, maybe he won't implement the aspect the other way. Maybe they wasted so much time debating a smaller point, they never got to the larger point, which could have fixed it and gone the way that the team aspect wanted to go. Again, LocoDoo has to have the final say in this approach if you want him to be a successful coach and to get all the accoutrements of being a coach, being allowed to set the idea. These are not just luxuries, these are necessities to be a coach and to implement your strategy and your approach on the game. Likewise, it goes beyond that. When players have a direct say, then all these different levels of the game, so we've got the team identity, specific strategies, tactics, very minor tweaks to how one player plays a tiny little aspect of his role, not even the overall approach of the team. If the final say is not with Loco, then every aspect of that has the potential to be short-circuited. and you will never get to the bottom of the bigger problems. What I mean by short-circuited is someone like a Bjergsen can argue what in isolation of his particular role in one fight may actually be correct in the sense that for his style it's better, may even be more efficient, might even have been more successful in that one instance. But because he's not looking at how it connects into the tactic, into the strategy, into the identity of the team, he's actually not understanding that he's going to short-circuit the whole circuit. He's going to blow the whole circuit, because by doing something that's not in line with the rest of it, we're not going to be in a position now where the machine is going to work, essentially. This one little problem going here is going to derail everything. So that's where the final say has to come to Loco, because he has to maintain the overall structure. The overall machine has to keep working. The circuit has to be complete to a degree. In a world where the players can disagree with that, they can throw the whole thing off. And at the end of it, who gets blamed? Not ultimately the player, especially if he can argue that he did the right thing there. The coach gets blamed, yet he's the one who didn't get to implement what he wanted to do. Also, the reason why I say you'll never be able to really get to the bottom of big problems, small problems you can have these debates about, but the bigger problems like strategical aspects, or even worse, like team identity, where you're playing totally the wrong way for who's in your team and how they interact with each other and what the unit strengths are, the reason why you're never going to get to the bottom of those problems is because as the coach, with this big overview, you need to have as many pieces set in place as you want them as possible, so that you know, okay, well, it's not an issue with this strategical aspect here. It's not an issue with the overall tactic. I can make a tiny tweak in how this player is playing it. It's not that. The player did it fine there and actually did it within the role. I had the tactic maybe needs to tweak. They couldn't have performed that. That's the tactics actually seemed okay, and overall that was right, but still something went wrong. Right? Maybe strategically my approach was wrong in terms of the comps we were using or how we were going to play this particular style. I guess comps is more tactics, but the style that we're actually going to play, the tempo we're going to play at, what overall objective approach are we going to take? Or are we going to do more team fight approach? Maybe this was a little bit off. Maybe I should rethink that. If not that, maybe I've even got the identity of the team wrong. You need to have all the parts in place so that he can say, right, it's not this, check this. It's not this, check this. It's not this, check this. If these little things are going wrong and being changed, then it's like you're trying to fix something on a car over here and you didn't see it, but someone else over here undid a bolt or nut here, or someone poured something else in the gas tank while you weren't looking. And you're thinking, right, well, I know there's gas in the tank and the bolts are all on and this is it, but you can't know all that. And so to get to the bottom of it, it's going to take way too long. And logistically, when you're talking about fixing between games, there's not going to be time. So that's also why the coach has to have this final authority in that particular sense. Then you get to a situation where if the coach doesn't have overall final authority, final say, there are players who will actually, in general, this will overall work. I've seen it so many times throughout esports history. Players actually will come to resent the coach because he allows them to choose what happens, and then they lose games and they make mistakes based on the choices they were allowed to make, or they even make a mistake they think was correct, but which then loses them the game. They will actually resent that coach. They will resent the idea that they were allowed to then fuck up and do something totally wrong, and then essentially the real implication that they know secretly is that actually it's my fault. I argued for that. I wanted that. And now it's all on me. The difference is when it's the coach, yes, they can blame the coach and say, I don't like this approach. But overall, eventually he gets fired if that's the case, correctly. Instead, they're supposed to be following his lead overall. So that, yes, it is his fault to a degree. It's his call. It's his dance. We're all following his lead. It's not supposed to be players who are getting the responsibility and the choice to make the mistakes that are going to cost us everything in this particular macro sense, not just in individual players, which obviously they have the direct control over. And players in general won't respect someone who allows them to make those fucked up decisions that aren't correct. There's actually an aspect to players. That's why all the great players you hear, even the ones that are like Doublelift and Frog and who sound like they're really uncoachable, they all say, no, I want to be coached. I want to, because they want someone who's willing to do this, but who overall can prove to them that he's right and all the rest of it. Yes, they'd argue cats and dogs over the small details, but in a way they really do want this overarching approach. They don't want to have everything in their hands overall. Likewise, you should never allow players to overrule or argue with a coach. Now the key thing there is when I say the words overrule and argue. Now overrule, they can discuss with a coach. They can even go back and forth with the coach, discuss the merits of it. Say, I don't really agree with this aspect. This is more how I see it. What they can't do is then say, right, but it's going to be this way. Like, I've decided this is right. Even if you say that's the correct way, we're going to do it this way. I want it done this way. That's the end of the story, which it does get the sense that at times that's been there. Now, I don't know that the players in TSM ever had the actual opportunity, especially Bjergsen, to literally overrule LocoDoo, though it sounds like sometimes LocoDoo let them, like if they were really insistent on it, which is his own fault, because then if they fail, still on you, mate. You're still responsible for those players. If you gave away your power to someone else, that's still your problem. If I give someone else, whatever, you know where I'm going with that. So you can't give away your power and then have someone else use that power incorrectly and go, oh, well, it's not my power. Well, it is though, isn't it? You could have made that choice yourself. And so you'll be judged either way. I'd rather, if I'm you, be the one who makes the choice and then is judged based on it. Take the guy's suggestion, definitely. If you think it makes more sense, go with that. But never go with it where he makes a suggestion, you don't think it makes more sense, like this Ori versus Ezreal thing. And then you go, well, to me that doesn't make sense. I don't think that's right. But since you said it, I will do that anyway. You're allowing him to overrule you there. When I say don't argue, that doesn't mean you can't discuss the merits of things. You can't go back and forth. You can't disagree. It means you can't argue in the sense of like where people get locked into a thing where I'm right, therefore I'm going to show it and I'm going to win out over you. That can't happen. It has to be discussion, has to be suggestions. Because in this world where you can overrule and you can argue, you're going to get what happens in TSM at times it looks like, which is subordination. We know this has happened in CLG in the past. It's where players eventually get to the point, usually once they've lost enough, usually once they've tried a couple of times what the coach suggested and it didn't work in the way that they thought the coach suggested it would have, that they not only want their ideas to be listened to, but they actually stop respecting the coach to a degree. They don't want to do what the coach does. They don't respect the coach. They're going to do what the coach does to a degree, but maybe not even do it with a whole heart, do it half-heartedly, maybe do it as if when it fails, you go, well, that's what you told me to do. My way, of course, would have been different. That whole aspect is terrible because that's the sort of thing, especially if star players do it, where it spreads and the whole locker room will no longer respect the coach. The whole barrel will become rotten. It'll be over at that point. Now, the stuff about the healthy discussion, that's not really the main role of a coach. That's the problem. Remember, that's what he said Loco's role was. Let me see, what was it? His job is to facilitate healthy discussions among the team members for us to fix our problems and improve. Now, yeah, there should be healthy discussions. That's great. The head coach might even be involved in that, take even a leading role in that. That is not his sole job, though. That is a side component of his job, which is having the final say, setting the identity, the strategy, the tactics, the overall structure, making sure people are in line, in position, playing the way they should. And then these discussions can kind of be a compost to maybe help with his ideas, to give him a couple of extra things here and there, something he hadn't thought of, a different perspective, maybe even an interesting new aspect that he's willing to take on board. That's not his whole job. That's not his main job. That's not the job of head coach. In fact, in real sports, that aspect, setting up the conversation, facilitating it, maintaining it, is actually often not even the head coach's job. If you have a really great head coach, that what they often do is have assistant coaches who maintain the discussion like that so that they can manage the personalities. And then sometimes when you have personalities who disagree, you can have different, because in the NBA, you have multiple assistant coaches. You might assign one assistant coach who gets along with this player well to kind of be on his side and to discuss it with him. Like, listen, man, I know what you mean, but listen, you have to understand, like, this other guy, he's trying to come at it from this perspective. So we've got to find some kind of compromise here. We've got to find a way we can play. Both of us can do our thing and, be within the same box that's going to work as a team identity. Then you have another guy on the other side who's like, listen, yeah, we've got to work together. So you can have people even play off the emotional sides privately, but then they have to maintain the group and make sure that all works within the team concept there. Essentially, those coaches are sort of like the social lubricant here. And sometimes they're maintaining the discussion here, keeping it healthy, so that later on, if the star player still disagrees, they can go to that guy and they can be like, listen, I know like the coach, I know you, I can kind of translate for you what the coach really means in terms of your context. And even if he did sound like he disagreed with you, he agrees with some of your content, some of your points you're making here. It's just that as a team concept, he can't do that. Therefore, he can't just overwhelmingly agree with you. And he has to keep the team on focus for this, even though he understands you have issues here. That's a great aspect. I mean, hey, if he wants to use Loco for that, maybe he can. Just seems like a waste to me. Then we get into this scenario where he says, the best team environment is one where all players participate in discussions and bring up concerns. But currently, the only person on our team that does that is Bjergsen. Because he's so vocal, the community is mistaking it for him fighting against Loco and him having an ego. Also, due to the fact that the other players are quiet, it makes it look even worse when Bjerg and Loco are having a heated discussion. The other team members need to step in and give their opinions of the situation so that it's not just two people with different opinions going head to head, but they're not doing that. Now, first of all, this is going to get into the topic of Bjergsen's ego. In terms of Bjergsen's ego, first of all, I get the sense when Reggie said having an ego, like, listen, Reginald, I would go ahead and bet money, has not done much research into modern psychology, or I'd imagine any kind of psychology or philosophy for that matter. So I imagine when he says having an ego there, that's just supposed to be a colloquialism for a bad attitude, a big ego. Because, I mean, I hate breaking news to you, mate, but everyone has an ego. Well, first of all, it's a model of how the mind works. It's not a fact. But within this model, it's a component of the mind that interacts with other parts. And yes, if it gets out of control, sometimes it maybe even imagines it's the whole thing and it can overrun everything. And that's why we say like having a big ego, an ego is a problem, an attitude problem. That's, yes, where it all stems from. But first of all, the reason why I make this case is because players should definitely have egos, and their egos should be proportionate to how important their role is, how much pressure is on them, how much responsibility is on them, and who they are within the team. And that's where the topic of Bjergsen comes up. Because you have to understand, one thing I really dislike, you'll notice I always argue against when I'm talking about other shows, on other shows or in other videos about star players, I always give the star player an extra luxury. I give him the star player ego. He's allowed to be more egotistical, no matter what people think. There should be a place for the star player ego. Now, the reason why is because he has to carry. There's more responsibility on him. He's the one who has to win the game. He might have a slightly better understanding every now and then of what he himself has to do to know his win conditions. To put it in sporting terms, if he's the main scorer in basketball, he knows how he's going to get his points every night. That's his whole job. That's his whole strength since he's been 15. He can do that. Give him a little bit of leeway there sometimes if he says, I have to go this approach. If you force him down, you railroad him into something else, then it's not going to work for him and it's not going to work for the team. And now, what, he's just going to blame you because it's not that way? There has to be a level of star player ego to a degree. That might also mean in discussions, that player to a degree gets to have more of a voice or gets to be a little bit more competitive in terms of how he discusses. But again, he still doesn't get to overrule overall. We just give him some of that because of who he is and the pressures he has to put up with. And he has to carry some aspects of the team and it's all on him. We give him some luxury there. But again, he doesn't go too far. He definitely does not get to overrule the coach. That does not happen. Otherwise, there's no point in having a coach. You may as well make this player the coach in that point in time. So to tie this back into the Loco thing, if MSI and putting Bjergsen on all those champions which were far from the carry champions he normally plays, having him on Urgot, having him on Cho'Gath, if that really was LocoDoo's choice in terms of identity, strategy, tactics, and minor tweaks, then Bjergsen should actually go along with it as he did in this premise. And then once you lose and it goes terribly, it's shown not just on a play level, but on all fundamental levels to be incorrect. That's when you bring it up, either privately with LocoDoo, like, listen, I don't think that was the right approach. Can we have a discussion about this? Can we talk about maybe what you were thinking? And here's kind of my feedback there. Or, if not with LocoDoo, you go to Reginald privately and you say, listen, I think that approach was all wrong, and I don't think this worked very well. And so, since you're Loco's boss, it's not up to me to tell Loco that this is all wrong and that I'm not going to play like that. But I wanted to tell you that I don't agree with the way this is. And in that scenario, by the way, there might even then be a discussion about I don't think Loco's the right coach for me. But if not, then what you do is you allow Reginald, who is the boss of LocoDoo, to then be the one who goes to LocoDoo separately and has this discussion. All of this stuff should not be in the locker room, should not be in the main chats, where everyone's just there and directly Bjergsen gets to say to LocoDoo, this isn't the right way. And then Reginald's like, yeah, and I agree with that, and backing up. And people, that's where you just destroy all respect for LocoDoo, and you ruin the whole hierarchy. People don't know where they are anymore. Because Reginald is LocoDoo's boss, not Bjergsen, and that line should never be crossed. And those rules should always be set and always understood. Now, to relate back to LocoDoo, if MSI was all Loco's choice like that, that's part of why it's good that it's his choice. Because now if he failed in all these aspects, we know it's something about him that's a problem. And that he's maybe not understanding either the personnel, like maybe he had the right approach but the wrong personnel for it. He's not understanding that. All the players can't do what he says. And maybe some of the players aren't competent for what they need to do to be the best team. See, now you can start to solve the problems because now you've got some of the pieces in place where you can look which are the pieces that are faulty here and what are they a knock-on effect of if they aren't just in themselves the problem, if they're just a symptom of a disease and the cause is somewhere else, the root cause of it. So that's part of why you want it to be that way. Because if instead MSI was Loco had some choices, and the same thing happened here with the Ori Ezreal debate in the Team 8 game, and Loco said to do this and that, and Bjergsen was like, no, I think we should do this instead. And he was like, okay, Bjergsen, you get to overrule me this time. And they go and do that. Now what do we do? What do we fire Bjergsen? Do we tell Bjergsen to behave and do that? Well, shouldn't he have been doing that from day one, whether or not he agreed or not? That's not his job to make these final decisions. He can have input. His job is to play the fucking game with whatever tools he's given at the end of the day. And if he doesn't like it, he can leave the team, can ask for LocoDoo to be fired. Yes, there's lots of options. There's lots we can do there. But the initial structure must be maintained for this all to work. Bjergsen has given signs of subordination. As in, he hasn't necessarily said, I won't do this or I won't do that way, but he's kind of verbally let on as if he might ignore LocoDoo, or he just will not even accept a concept that he doesn't agree with, that has to be wrong, or even has sort of a well, whatever approach to like LocoDoo's set opinions. Now, off topic, I can understand some of the personal issues going here. By the way, I'll just go ahead and state this right now. Bjergsen is the fucking Michael Jordan of NALCS. He is not just the best player in TSM. He is not just the best player in NALCS. He is by far the best player in NALCS, and to the extent that there is no other player in NALCS who, when he is playing his best, gives his team a better chance to win and almost single-handedly is responsible for the wins of his team. That's why I accord him Star Player Ego, and I do accept that even though he doesn't understand maybe some of these concepts I'm explaining here about how to deal with it differently, tactfully and politically, and not humiliate people and not make this as a public problem when you can do it privately and accomplish the same ends. That's the problem there. It's the methods he's using. The actual intention, I can understand it. I think he even probably is right in some of these cases, and LocoDoo and maybe even Reginald sometimes are wrong in these particular cases. But anyway, as an off-topic point, to counter that, I will say that also, when you talk about, I've defended a lot of what I think LocoDoo should have in position here, but as a personality, at least in the past, less so now, but still to a degree, as you see from a lot of these discussions, even when he's debating with Reginald, LocoDoo is a very stubborn person, or at least he's a quite stubborn person. Maybe he's changed a little bit. He actually, what's funny is I always understood why he never got along with Doublelift in that sense, because he has something in common with Doublelift in this particular sense. They are the guys who, it's not just that they want to be right, but they want to be right and be the first to be right. And so when there's like an open topic, like a new champion that hasn't even been played, or a champion that's only been tested over here, rather than be like, well, you know, I don't think it'll be very good, but, you know, maybe I'll be proven wrong about it. They're the guys who immediately like, that's trash. No, we don't play that. That'll never be good. And then because they've set that hard line so early on without much data, it's like then they've set up a dam and an overwhelming amount of evidence has to build up until it bursts the whole fucking dam. And then finally they go the other way, as they could have done early on if they hadn't just committed to this position. And they could realize, all right, let's just follow the way that the meta's going and actually change in that sense. So actually, he has always been someone where there's been an issue there. And it's like, when you sometimes do have time to fully analyse, they're so quick to dismiss things, that seems like an issue. And these stubborn claims made too early, that's a problem in itself. And so as a coach, I can see why that will be a problem at times. Especially if you're using very black and white things. Like, okay, your players here are telling you, I can't do this won't work for me. And you're like, no, this is my version, square brackets, much superior player in Korea who's significantly better than you and has a totally different playing style. He makes it work, therefore we're going to do that. Again, you can't have that sort of black and white, jumping to conclusions type scenario. Tell me this, if it's just Bjergsen doing it, when Loco's talking here, I know some of the others talked, especially when Reggie was there. If it's just Bjergsen speaking up now, why don't the other members speak up? Let's try and riddle through some of the reasons. Do they like losing? Do they enjoy discord among the team? They don't give a fuck how the team works. Do they think Bjergsen's right, and so that he's speaking for them to a degree, and they're just letting him go because he's the star player with the luxury and the star player ego? Are they embarrassed to admit that they agree with Loco and go against the carry player who's carrying them every game, even in bad games? And they know to a degree, I fuck up sometimes, even though I don't agree with the way Bjergsen's playing. He won the game for us. Are they embarrassed with that? We'll never get to the bottom of all this, because have you noticed, no one within their structure is trying to ask any of these questions or go to these players separately and have some of the discussions which build into the bigger discussions. And that's part of the problem. These sorts of players who are willing to sit back like this in general is who Reginald has always recruited and built an environment in TSM around, partly because he was such a vocal presence himself. And so I've always said this, Reginald has repeatedly created an environment of beta male passive-aggressive type players where they will just sit back and take it. They will just be like, oh yeah, I guess it was my fault in that game, even though they couldn't even rationally tell you why, except just to repeat what you've just told them as to why it's wrong. They don't necessarily agree with it, but they just go with it. And then they won't always speak up if something's wrong, because they don't want to make waves, they don't want to rock the boat. Because you know what happens when you rock the boat and you make waves, right? If you're just a role player in TSM, yeah, you magically get attitude problems and you get shanghaied the fuck out of there. That's what happens to you, mate. You get court-martialed, you're out of that motherfucker. Whether you are someone like Expecial who goes on to still be a great player, whether you're whoever it is. Now, if you're in a situation, though, where you might be thinking along those lines, oh, wait a minute, though, that can't be right. You've just said you're Bjergsen speaking up all the time. He has the star player ego. That's because Bjergsen gets to be Reginald in this situation. That's what Reginald did before. Reginald was doing all the shit. He wanted to have all the say. He wanted people to play that he wanted. He wanted to play the champions he wanted to play. He wanted to decide the comp. He wanted to say that that fight was wrong and that this player misplayed, even though that player can have great reasons for it and was actually trying to do something beneficial for the overall approach. It was all wrong. And he was the carry and he's the star player, therefore he gets to say it all. So Bjergsen's actually just fulfilling the Reggie role. What's funny is Reggie's just recreated TSM without him and a much better player in his position. Now, the problem with this approach, this open group discussion, which they're all supposed to speak up as much as a guy who's way more confident and is the carry player and has confidence in himself and thinks he can argue point to point with the coach and the owner, the reason why this is a flawed concept is because that type of a free-for-all discussion totally ignores like human psychology, both on individual terms, how people work and how group psychology works, and it also fails to understand people's strengths and weaknesses in terms of how they articulate themselves or how they think and how to get the best out of them in the sense of a discussion, getting their opinions, getting their feedback, having interaction between concepts. So here's something you need to do. If you want to have group discussions, you need to create the group discussion, but it can't be a free-for-all. Like you have to have the group discussion and then you have sections which are free-for-all and you have other sections where you have specific instances where you ask one player certain key questions of his opinion, or after someone like Bjergsen's given an opinion, you ask separately, what do you think here, Thorin? Could you have done this differently? Ignoring what Bjergsen said now, what do you think of your approach in here? That's how you coax the opinion out of them. I mean, listen, by the way, I'm much more experienced in this area than Reginald and other people because I'm actually an interviewer. I understand the different sorts of group settings and individual settings and how you build up a pattern of how someone thinks and how to get interesting information out of them without them feeling betrayed, like you stole it from them or you forced them into a difficult situation. You only do that when you know the person can handle it and when they're actually the sort of person where maybe they even respond to that. They don't mind that in that sense. That makes them fire back in a way. That's another thing. You have to know the sorts of people you've got, even in the discussion, the personnel in that sense. So quieter players have to be put in a position where they can speak and be heard. Their input can be heard, even by the star player who has to be quiet for a minute and listen to them. But you have to artificially create these circumstances. It won't naturally happen. And just telling them, like quiet people, just be as forthcoming and just be as loud as the others, please. That's teamwork. That doesn't do anything, mate. That won't help anything. They will regress to their initial state. They might even try it for 5 minutes or a week, but they'll forget about it. They'll go back to what they were because that's who they are as people at the moment. It should never be shouting matches, battles, or arguments in these. Remember, it's a discussion with putting forth ideas, passing them back and forwards, making little changes, trying to compare them, adding more information, stack them up and see how they contrast against each other. Think of it this way. It's like you're solving a murder mystery. You're all the detectives who all come in with different pieces of information, different processes for doing so, and you're all going to work together. It doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong, all the rest of it. You're going to try and riddle things out until you solve the case. So we're going to work as a team. We're not against each other. We're actually a team. We're working together to solve the problem, which is that this team, which actually is us, but we're going to do it in an abstract sense. What do you think's going on with this team? What could they do differently to win it? And then eventually when we reintegrate that, it's going to be us. It's going to work in that sense. That's why you have to allow suggestions sometimes which you don't think are right, and they might not even be ultimately right. That might not be the way to play the game. It might not be the best way to play the game. That might not be how Faker plays the game, but it's right enough. It's right enough for you. It's right enough for your team. It's right enough for this moment, what you can do right now. It's right enough for where you're trying to go. That's why it's key for it to be discussion, not arguments and not fights and battles and shouting matches. Now then, another quote from Reginald. I believe players should always have a right to question management decisions and management should always be have a reasonable answer for the players. Now, in spirit, I agree with this. I think the sentiment makes a lot of sense. But again, it's the implementation of this that I think is flawed. This sort of questioning of management decisions and then management like having to have a reasonable answer for the player as if like then it doesn't fly or whatever, that should not be happening in front with players doing the questioning in front of their superiors and everyone else. Because then you're going to get into scenarios where if the player asks a certain question a certain way or is even mildly disrespectful or dismissive in a sense, then it's going to maybe cause others to feel an environment where they lose a bit of respect for the guy, the man superior, when he doesn't have a great comeback immediately or he doesn't have a great answer or their answer doesn't fly. They're like, in their mind, they're like, I think I agree with the star player there. Fuck, I'll just let him keep arguing it. Like, that's not supposed to be going on that way. That sort of disagreement is better done outside the confines of it, where you can have the private conversation where then it's only you and them. Therefore, it's behind closed doors and you're not having to worry about affecting others negatively. Then you can hash some of these things out. If Bjergsen shows up LocoDoo within this structure of how it's being allowed, say he shows up LocoDoo by initially being a debate about a general point in the game, a strategical point, and then they take it to a tactical level and an individual play level, and then Bjergsen keeps the argument going like that. Yeah, but I disagree in this way. And then he essentially drags Loco into his world where he's an expert and Loco isn't. If he then shows up LocoDoo on a mid lane matchup detail, it will immediately erode the trust of the others in LocoDoo and his overall concept, even though he's never supposed to be the expert coach who knows all the details, because it's then they've put the final grounds as to who was right on that argument into this area where LocoDoo's going to lose. And because it's done publicly, then that player might think, yeah, and I don't agree with what he asks me to do sometimes in a very specific case. But remember the hierarchy I set up before. Just because individually they might have a better idea or they think a more efficient, effective way doesn't mean that theirs is right and theirs should be implemented if it destroys the strategical approach and if it crumbles the foundations of the identity of the team. That's why it's very important not to let these kinds of very subtle problems happen, which are then going to be key turning points in terms of how other people think of the team and their coach and how the team as a whole is supposed to function. Who gets the final say in this? Bjergsen has overwhelming power in this particular respect. All star players do. Since he can make things work which theoretically are not correct. They are not sound. They are not fundamentally, principally the way the game should be played. They might, in Bjergsen's case, only work for North America, not international competition, which ultimately is the end goal. You're trying to play well. The logic is, if you play well and improve on an international level, you will, in doing so as a byproduct, win and place highly in your region, and then you will have been heading on the right track to be a top international team. You're never trying to make it short term, like just win the next game, and then we'll win NA, and then we'll change things and figure out what we need to do at the NA to go from NA to international. There's not going to be time between the end of the summer split, and you can't change your whole identity, strategy, and tactics to go to Worlds at that point. You can change some of your tactics, you can shift some of your strategy, but the team identity and how you've practiced needs to have been set long ago, and ideally from day one, that would have been set in place if it's done correctly, even if it needs tweaks. So that's why you don't let Bjergsen draw you down into these areas, then overrule you. Because then he could make something work against fucking Team 8 that isn't the right approach and will cost you big time at an MSI or a Worlds. But he got away with it and made you look silly and eroded your trust because you let him do it on this base level. Again, it's about trying to play the right way and the right way for your team, not making it into these arguments. Quote from Reginald, right now, Loco is having a difficult time keeping the conversations productive. Well, I wonder why that is. It's almost like he doesn't have final say and players can argue as much as they want and Bjergsen can keep it going and can disagree and can take him into this muddy water. Well, LocoDoo now, how does he eject from that? He can't go, well, listen, as final say, like, I understand you have your own perspective, but we're going to play it this way and we're going to go to this. He doesn't have the authority, remember. It's a discussion. In fact, he's not even supposed to end the discussion like that. He's supposed to say, yes, but maybe it's like this and can we keep the discussion going, please, Bjergsen? I mean, ultimately, all you're doing here is, it's not the case that you're not letting anyone end the discussion. You're essentially letting Bjergsen discuss it if he wants to stall it out as long as he wants. So, part of the reason why this doesn't work in keeping the conversations productive is that right now, he's just another member of the team. He's equal. So what makes him different? Like, what makes Bjergsen stop if LocoDoo asks him to? Nothing, because that's not LocoDoo's job to ask Bjergsen to stop. How can LocoDoo lead when he has no authority? He doesn't even have the backing of the owner that this guy's in charge of your conversation, so please listen to what he's saying. And ultimately, even if you discuss things and you have your own perspective, please follow what he's doing. That's what I pay you for. That's what my overall goal. And I trust his overall structure. If there's something wrong with the structure, I'll address that myself in the off season, and I'll be tracking his one. I'm his boss. You're subordinates to me, to him and me. And so please play a role within our organization. That's how we're going to win as a team. Trust that I have the overall approach set in place by delegating it myself to LocoDoo, which is what Reginald hasn't done. So how can he lead without authority? Now, yes, here's the thing. There's a catch to that. In an ideal world, even without the seal of approval or authority, Loco could actually lead and teach people and have the final say. But only if he was so charismatic as a person, just had that aura about him and his words carried this special weight that they just won people over, which is a very rare sort of person. That's like alpha male and beyond. There's very rare. That's why, you know the movie Gladiator, this is the best example of it. General Maximus, where at all levels that he interacts with men, even when he becomes a slave, he's just in these fighting pits, everyone he meets, just the way he carries himself and the way he speaks and the way he doesn't just waste language and the way he actually has conviction behind what he does, and then he's able to do what he's going to do and be able to, so star player ego to a degree, that wins people over. That makes people want to follow a guy like that. That's the sort of person where naturally people will follow that sort of guy. That's why they're the alpha. LocoDoo not only isn't that sort of person, but it's very naive to expect nerds who were super into League of Legends to ever be that sort of person, especially if their background is just being a nerd and just being a player of video games. It's very unlikely they've got to that point in life if they were that sort of person. It's very different. It's an outside coach who's learned League of Legends, he's coming in. Maybe they could have some of it. So again, I think that's very naive to think that can work. Reginald quote. Multiple players have expressed that they're not confident with giving Loco complete authority. First question, who gives a fuck? Yeah, that's my first question, mate. It's not their job to say if they're confident with it or not. Their job is to follow what he does, and if he's doing the wrong thing and making the wrong choices, he should then be judged on those choices as competence at his job. It is fucking irrelevant what Thorin or Dyrus think about whether Loco should have complete authority or not. I can tell you right now, to those people, I'm not saying to whatever player complain about that he is right and what he's doing is correct. I'm saying let's actually let him try it and then judge him on those merits. And if he's not right, let's get someone who is right and who does fit you as players. Now, with that said, the only way that's going to work is if he does have complete authority. So even if he is wrong, he has to have that authority. I don't give a fuck if you think he shouldn't. You don't understand the structure. You're just a player. And so the idea that Reginald's giving credence to this, you can actually see how, in a way, Reginald is not delegating authority to Loco. He's actually delegating some of the authority to the fucking players to be subordinate to Loco, and even sort of agreeing like, well, since I don't agree with what Loco does, yeah, I kind of agree with you guys, maybe he shouldn't have authority. This is ridiculous. If that's really the case, that he shouldn't have complete authority and that his players don't think so, and you agree with them because you're fucking saying this in public, then Loco should be fired and he should not be the coach of TSM. It's one or the other. There's no band-aid fix for this where he gets to not have complete authority, not be the coach, still stay as some sort of a coach, one day become the head coach again, still maybe not have complete authority. Like, this isn't going to work. There's no band-aid fix for this. There's no in-between. It's one or the other. You have to go all in on the guy or you have to dismiss him. The notion that players know best, by the way, drives me up the fucking wall. Look at Elements. Look at all these teams where players get to decide for themselves how the team should play. Look at Fnatic in the summer split of last year, where some of them just fucked around and wouldn't play champions that were in the meta. And then they would play champions which were in the meta that they suddenly decided they want to play, but they didn't have enough games on them, so they'd blow a game here and there. And then they gradually skimped it and finally got into the playoffs. At the very end, they picked it all up and then had a sick playoff run and still almost went out in the semis. Players very rarely, here's the thing, they usually know what's best for them individually within specific situations. They very, very rarely understand what's best for the team overall in terms of strategy and the identity of the team. That's why you see them repeatedly get the wrong players to go in their teams or play the wrong style even for some of the other members of the team, but it might be the right style for them. This is an issue where I've almost never seen players that really understood this aspect to any deep level. Now, let's see. Another Reginald quote. I've also seen a lot of players compare our coaches to better coaches from other regions where they do have complete control over players, but our coaching staff is nowhere near that level. First of all, before I get into this, let me pop this fucking bubble. And I have to say, Monty unfortunately plays into this himself, that the reason why these coaches in other regions are so much better is because they've had a StarCraft industry for 10 plus years and esports has gone on 15 years. And so, we can't be at their level because we're years behind them. That doesn't actually make sense when you logically assess it. Because the coaches we're talking about, yes, the head coaches who are like Reginald, owner type dudes at that level almost, some of them have gone back 10 years or have gone back 5 years or whatever. Some of them are in that position. But the problem is, the actual coaches who are making set decisions or sometimes deciding things and doing these other things, some of them have only been around a few years. Koma was a fucking player in 2012. So LocoDoo became a coach a couple of years ago. Some other people became coaches 2.5 years ago. They're not even coaches for significantly less time than Koma. He's like a year ahead of some of them. Half a year ahead of some of them. How is he so much better? He hasn't been around 10 plus years. He hasn't learned anything special magically from this guy in StarCraft. Part of the reason why that hierarchy exists, by the way, in Korean esports, here's where I'm going to pop the bubble for you, is because that's how fucking Korean culture works. Go and read books about Korean culture and how companies are structured and how you're not allowed to have back chat to a boss in a certain area and how a boss can take you out for a meal, a work meal, hoshik, and he can tell you to drink alcohol now and you can't be like, no, I really don't want alcohol. You just have to do it, even in a fucking social environment. This is craziness to someone in the West. This isn't how we think it works. So first of all, that system will not directly port over to the West. And secondly, here's the key thing to say. Some of it naturally occurs within their social hierarchy, which as a result, players naturally respond to that. So it's not the case that you can just act like, oh, this is why, ours haven't had the time to get to that level. No, you could adapt to your own culture and the way your players work, which is what we have in fucking Western sports now, and you could have someone be a good coach in 6 months. This is another aspect. I'll make a side point here. I've made this point many times about teams. The reason I always make the point that teams nearly always only improve significantly based on a roster move minimum is because usually you find out how good you are on a day-to-day basis. Like once you've played, yes, the first week it might be difficult, but after say 2-3 weeks of play, a month of play, you know who you are as an identity there. You know what the strengths of the team are, you know how people are going to play. Odds are you are not going to exponentially grow at that point in time. You're probably close to as good as you can be, tightening up a few things, shoring up a few things, get a little bit more consistent, maybe beat one more team and go one little rung up the ladder, but you're not going to jump 5 rungs up the ladder if you're not good enough at that point in time. And all the best teams, all the great champions, once they have the roster move and they have the team set in place, tend to become a champion that season. It happens almost immediately. They quickly become the best, and then they become the best and it just works. There's no gradual thing of there's no logic where it's like, oh, we're Samsung Blue, and even though we just made this roster move, I guess the reason why we can't get better is because like CJ and Displays have had some of their players for like a year and a half, 2 years, but we've only had our players like 5 months, or in some cases like 1 month. No, you just become the best immediately. Meanwhile, Blaze is fucking miles when they've had their players for ages. It doesn't work that way. Same with coaching. If you really were a good coach, and you really were improving, and you really were studying the structure of your culture and your types of sports and the sorts of things that would fit your team and your personnel, you would become good quite quickly, and the signs and the strengths and the weaknesses and overall identity of you as a coach and the team would manifest very quickly and be decided very quickly. It wouldn't take years and years, wouldn't take a decade to get there. That's very naive to think that way, and other examples in esports do not prove it out. Now then, in terms of this aspect of comparing to other coaches from other regions, okay, let's accept Reginald's premise that those coaches are just better and that the system's better over there, etc. Well, how about getting one of those coaches from one of those regions? Go to one of those teams. I can tell you right now, Reginald, some of those coaches do not earn as much as you could pay them quite reasonably without breaking the bank, especially for the success you'd have. Go and hire one of those coaches to be the head coach. Again, head coach. Have someone else do tactics, speak with players. Since they have a specific experience and background, pay them top dollars and have them come in either to coach, or if not coach, help them grease the wheels, fix a few of the problems that they see, design an overall system to use. Again, it's not going to be perfect because you're living in a naive world where the Koreans are doing everything right and they've just got the right approach. No, in their culture, they've got the right approach for their personnel. They play the right style for them, if you understand. And by the way, some of them don't. That's why some of them, like the CJ coaches, fucking terrible for years and have never figured shit out and have played totally wrong style for even some of the strengths and the metas of the teams that they've had and haven't had success in a long time. Now then, and nudging coaches, same shit there. If you're not going to hire one of those guys, then you have to build the coach. Because remember, essentially what I'm telling you is there are people available who can do what you're asking. And I'm like, could you hire them, please? No, I won't. Well, in that case, you have to build the coach, and don't you? There's no other choice. So to build the coach, how do you do that? By doing exactly what you're not doing with LocoDoo. You decide this is going to be a coach. Here's my coach. I'll put him in place, give him all the powers of a coach, tell him how I want a coach to work, set in place the hierarchy, make sure the players understand, and then let the machine run. Let it run a few cycles, see how it works, let it play out a lot of different scenarios. Then you judge what happens. So essentially, you give LocoDoo a full chance, and then if he doesn't work, he's not competent, you fire him. If he can't be tweaked to become better. You becoming the coach, especially temporary, does not fix the problem, does not solve the problem. It might at best be a quick band-aid to get you a few wins and to end the season well, but actually you're just delaying the process of the team getting a proper coach, a proper hierarchy, and becoming a better team overall. You're just delaying it. You're not helping. Another quote from Reginald. Starting Monday, I will be stepping in as head coach, and I'll be leading discussions within the team in a productive manner. Brackets, I won't be on stage. Now, first of all, we have to address Reginald's personality here. It has to be done because he's going to be the head coach. So this is someone with a history of terrible skills at leading discussions in a productive manner. The amount of video proof of this is overwhelming. This isn't just edited shit. No editor in the world could edit this sort of a thing to be on this level. I mean, this is a guy who literally, there is video evidence of him bullying Xpecial to tears. There's video evidence of him bullying Turtle, who was sat right next to him, for like 20 minutes of just abuse over and over and over to someone else, but about the guy sat next to him. This is a guy who's bullied Dyrus. We've seen this happen multiple times. If Chaos disagreed with him. That was always going to be one of the things setting in place, where then when Chaos did things that were worthy of discipline, Chaos was always going to be on the way out of the team at some point in that time. Now, people will cite his age and say, right, well, that was 2 years ago. A lot's changed since then. Oh, how do you know that? But just because the players tell you that and he says that? I mean, if someone this is an example, by the way, I'm not suggesting that he does this. If someone beats their wife and then the wife says like, but you have to understand, like, he has like good reasons too. Like sometimes I did fuck up, like I didn't cook the meal he wanted exactly right. And you know what? Like he is getting better at it. Like, he does, he apologizes for it now. And he does tell me like he understands he has anger issues and he had a hard time as a kid and stuff. You don't then say, oh, well, he's not a wife beater anymore. Oh, but those problems are all solved. No problem then. Let's not worry about that. And in fact, let's never question whether or not she tells the truth. Oh, you know what? He used to beat her. He used to punch her in the eye. But actually now he doesn't beat her because she says so. And she's just really clumsy and keeps banging her eye off the doorknob and off like the edge of the stairs. Like it's just coincidence, I guess. We can just ignore that. So unless we've seen evidence that he has, you shouldn't draw that conclusion. I'm not drawing the conclusion the other one saying he definitely hasn't. But I've yet to see this overwhelming evidence that shows how reasonable he is now, not least since when he was bullying people like that. That's when he was actively involved in the team and in the team decisions. Now he's more the owner, he's more laid back, he's less on the table in that sense because he's to some degree delegating responsibility and his team's been winning overwhelmingly. So that's the problem. Another issue, before I get off the issue of the bullying, is that when he was doing that bullying, it wasn't all justifiable in any sense. I mean, it's never justified to bully someone, but I mean, you couldn't even find reasonable explanations as to why, in the sense that it wasn't just anger at, like, this guy fucking up. It wasn't just frustration that things are going bad for him and things are going bad for the team and they're not winning the way he wants to. These, to a degree, have something positive behind them, even if they manifest in an ugly way. The problem is, when you watch those videos, I think the worst one has to be that video where he's bullying Turtle when they're in the cab and they're all eating the sandwiches and Special's trying to argue in Turtle's favour and not have Turtle be completely fucking humiliated in front of everyone. And even just argue, hey, maybe we all fucked up in different ways. It's not just all linearly on the last guy to make the last mistake who fucked the whole game up. We got it to that position, We all made mistakes before. Is that when you watch that video, Reginald's not just doing it out of anger and frustration. He has like a smile on his face. That he takes like a kind of sadistic glee out of wrecking this guy. And not only wrecking him, but knowing he can wreck him. And this guy can't do fucking anything. And isn't going to do anything. And just has to sit there and take it. And you know what? If this guy wants to stand up for him, then you're going to get it next, mate. And it's this kind of sadistic glee about him that actually, by the way, I think is worse than everyday bullying. Because that's like almost pathological. That's like there's something broken in you as a person. That's the way you manipulate and like to attack other people in that particular sense. Now, just because people watch the reality TV show and assume this won't be an issue now and think, right, well, he's changed and all the rest of it, that's because, again, like I just mentioned, wait until he's personally invested in this. Wait until his ego is attached to decisions he's made as a coach and conversations he's had and things where he thought he was right on it or someone else was wrong. Wait until that becomes the case. And then wait till the team loses games as a result of this, especially if someone then disagrees with something like, well, I didn't think what you suggested there and the game was right anyway, and that's part of why we lost. Wait until what happens then, because that's when it'll come out, and that's when the abuse will be there, and that's when there'll be issues. Reginald, as far as I can tell, watching a lot of interviews, watching him on reality TV shows, seeing him interact with people, seems to be someone who has difficulty when he's invested in this particular sense, personally and emotionally and egoistically. He has problems separating his personal thoughts from what his professional thoughts are. So what was good for him and what he thinks is right and when he thinks he's right about for what is right for the team and what someone else might have been right about. He has issues with that. He's also, in line with LocoDoo before, shown himself to be certain and stubborn at times that he's right. Even when there's actually not only no reason to be so stubborn, there's not even a need to be. Like, we still got time to figure this out. Hey, you can have not made the right decision now. Hey, you're a bigger man if you then figure out the right thing and you correct the mistake. It's like that famous thing I said. If you make a mistake, that's one thing. But to then not correct a mistake is to make two mistakes. That's not to stick with the original mistake. Oh, I made one mistake and I've just only made one throughout history. No, every time you had a chance to change and you didn't and you wouldn't look at new evidence and you wouldn't reconsider your own opinions, you've made a second mistake, a third mistake. You're making multiple mistakes here. Where, yeah, you made the first mistake. Fair enough, we all do. You only need to make the one mistake. You can then change it and try and fix it. You don't need to make multiple ones and stack them up and double down on shitty mistakes. That's why in gambling you don't chase losses like that. If you're fucking up and you don't know what you're doing, you don't bet even more because you obviously don't know what the fuck you're doing. The process doesn't work, and then risk losing it all and losing 10 times more to try and get back what you already did. You can't get it back at that point in time. You have to make correct decisions to win money now. Doing the wrong thing will only make you lose even more. So the problem here is this, okay? If he's going to be the head coach, and the problem is when I saw him as the head coach there, he wasn't just leading discussions. He wasn't just allowing other people's information from the analysts and the coaches and Loco to take place. He wasn't just fomenting interesting topics. He was also trying to make his opinion like, I think you're wrong that way. I think this is how you should do it. I don't agree with all these things. He was taking the coach role in the aspect of being the head coach that he would never let Loco be, essentially. Now that's a problem because where is Reginald's qualification to be good in it as a coach in that sense? Let's talk for a second about Reginald and who he was as a player and a shot caller. Now, Reginald as a shot caller, first and foremost, wasn't even a particularly good shot caller. His teams, when he was the shot caller of TSM, were significantly behind the Asian teams, and not just because of players. Because actually back then, they didn't have super beasts at every player, every role mechanically. Not even all of them were like by far the best. They had a lot of the best players, it's true. It was comparable to a degree then, and a lot of the game was still about laning individually and then overall endgame shot calling. There wasn't as much rotations and objective control and all the rest. Even then, Reginald's shot calling and how he would shot call around his individual game wasn't very good. In fact, I would describe it as this. It was only good, and it was only better than some of the other NA teams, because they followed his calls, because of the hierarchy he had in place and the authority he had, and demanding that people follow his calls. Remember the old famous quote that it's better for everyone to follow a bad plan than no plan at all. Or to put it another way, it's better for 5 people to follow a bad plan than 5 people to do their own totally separate good plans. There's going to be no cohesion there. At least you execute on the bad plan. You might then, out of individual outplays or just playing well as a team, be able to still get edges, and because you're all at least focused on one thing, the unit, the power, the strength of the team can come out and make a bad plan, sometimes in a winning situation. Him disagreeing with people strategically is a fucking joke, mate. What does he know about strategy? Let's talk again about him as a player and him as a shot caller. His style of play was so one-dimensional and all-in, it was an absolute joke. Now, he was good at that style. He was one of the better players at that style. But it only worked in NA. It only worked against some European teams and some NA teams. Against the elite players at his position, Alexic, later on Froggen in the second half of the year, Ambition from Blaze, Rapid Star from Frost, he used to get fucking body bagged. As in, he would play his style the way he wanted to, he would execute on it, he'd do what he principally thought was correct, strategically for him and in the team concept to do, and they would just sit there waiting for this guy to go balls deep on them, trying to do 1v1, level 1 and level 2 outplays, and force the jungler to come mid to help him all the time, and they would abuse the fuck out of him, and make him get reverse snowballed. That was his whole style, try to snowball the mid lane. They would bully the fuck out of him and wreck him. They would go to other lanes where they knew the jungler would not be and wreck the fuck out of them. And he was primarily, here's the thing, on an NA level, because he was shot calling and doing this one, and he had a set style, yes, it was succeeding there, but he was also, and he never acknowledged this, part of the reason they didn't succeed internationally. It wasn't because of Chaos, it wasn't because of Dyrus feeding. Those were separate issues, which, by the way, to a degree, were even in some senses symptoms of him, because he's the one who has the overall hierarchy and structure set in place and the final authority and final says. So that has to be said, first of all. He's also someone where, if you notice his individual career, his team career, and now as an owner, is really locked into that terrible, results-orientated style of thinking, where once they lose the game, he then just looks at like 1 or 2 of the final things that cost him the game and goes like, right, that's the fault there, and this is the fault here. Or even worse, just like, the whole pick and ban was always wrong, and it's always just when they lose. Like, it's all results oriented. So apparently Loco's coaching was great when they were winning all the games. Loco's coaching was always great in every other sense. It was never just Bjergsen carrying the game, by the way. That was never the case. I'm not saying it was, by the way. Loco had some good coaching at some times, but also sometimes Bjergsen was the ultimate band-aid for that team. When they should have lost games and would have lost games, I remember a game they had against like, I think it was Dignitas, the one where he just like super hard carried the game. Was that the one where he was on Xerath? I forget, but yeah, I've seen some games where they should have lost and he was the band-aid that kept them from losing it. But apparently in that case, well, great coaching, Loco, you did a great job there. What did I do? I just let the mid laner completely carry the whole game, take over, even though he was like 1v9ing. But I guess that was your strategy, right? I mean, this is a ridiculous notion. So this results-orientated is a really bad aspect, both in terms of trying to win NA and internationally. So what qualifies him to know better than his analysts, who he hires to be experts who know from outside the scene and they know all the different players, coaches, such as his coach that he's hired. By the way, if he does know better than all those guys, he should just fire those fucking guys there. Get other people that he respects, who he thinks knows more than him. That's a sign of great people, okay? Great people in business, one of the overwhelming trends is that they hire great people to surround themselves with, and they delegate what they can't do as well as that guy to that guy and have his genius build into their success overall, because they get ultimate responsibility for it. But this guy's the one who actually had delegation. He had some responsibilities to how he did this way, and then he exercised his brilliance, and we all get to have a say in it. That's what great people do. If you're better than all these other guys, you're not going to give them any authority. There's no point in them being there, actually. And in fact, to then blame them for it is fucking ridiculous. So let me think. So yeah, what qualifies him in that sense? I mean, he makes the statement in that show, right? I want everyone sending me the picks beforehand. So now your coaches, you don't even view them as competent to do the picks. You don't even view your analysts as knowing which picks are correct and one. Again, why are they here? I'll make a point. He did make a very good point, which is the idea that if you even are going to let Bjergsen have some say in the fucking champion, if you want to do that, maybe you want to let your star player have that luxury, then you then have to rebuild the comp around him. The problem Loco had was he had comps in mind. He then let Bjergsen pick a champion that didn't work within that comp and then tried to run the comp anyway. That's your fault, LocoDoo. You delegated the wrong time there. Only delegate if you then have a comp built around an Ezreal that you can work it on there instead, and you can make that work. Because at the end of the day, remember, you get judged for the results. Doesn't matter if you gave away your power. You gave it away. That was the decision you made. You think because he made a decision that he made the decision. No, you allowed him to make a decision. That's the first decision, was you letting him make a decision. Then he made a decision. The chain of command there still exists. So he did make a good point about that. Here's my prediction, having observed Reggie's history for many years now. He will review the picks and the comps in the future. And if TSM lose using the picks and comps he approved and maybe even had a say in, it will suddenly become the fault of the player not playing it out the right way. It won't be then on the comps and the picks. That's the sort of person Reginald is, I'm afraid. And that's not a good solution. Because actually, you have to be capable of admitting when you were wrong. You have to be capable of delegating when you're not capable of doing something. I don't know that he'll do that. Now, he says that he wants discussion, remember, to facilitate. That's the goal of the coach, remember, to facilitate healthy discussions. Yet, his discussions was him talking to TSM, and most of the time, when he was explaining the really big details, they were just sat there in an awkward, uncomfortable stance, not even making eye contact, looking at the ground, looking away, looking at each other, every now and then looking at him and looking away. That was not the body language and psychology of the team, that he was saying everything right, and this is all great. I mean, where was the discussion of the things he was saying? Where were the counters to what he was saying? Was everything he just said perfect and right? Doesn't seem likely, right? In the second discussion they had, he's talking to Dyrus. And Dyrus actually tries, not in the same way as a Bjergsen scenario. Here's the thing, with the Bjerg and Loco scenario, I pointed out that someone like Loco, his job is actually to keep the overall picture in mind and not let it digress into very specific game examples where Bjergsen can wreck him. This is what Reginald didn't even start with the overall approach. Reginald actually attacked Dyrus, or maybe not attack, confronted him and said he was wrong on very specific, game-specific stuff that was specific to Dyrus's role, where Dyrus is much better at that role than Reginald. And so as a result, he started discussing and debating with Dyrus and telling Dyrus he was wrong on real in-game scenarios, game-specific stuff that happened in that game, such as building Ninja Tabi instead of Merc Treads. And when Dyrus, on that level that Reginald's just taken it to, had a discussion and made rebuttals and counterpoints and explained why he would do that and what would happen if he'd have done Reginald's approach, Reginald had nothing. He had no fucking comeback. He couldn't even talk shop with Reginald on Dyrus on that level. He was like a child before an adult in that sense. It was like a kid going, "Daddy, why do you have to go to work? Why can't you just play with me all day?" And he's like, "Well, see this house, like I pay a mortgage on it and I have to upkeep a certain amount, and if a certain amount doesn't go in my bank account each month, I lose these privileges. And you know the healthcare, your cousins actually help them out." It was almost like that, and at the end the kid just being like, except the kid's the fucking owner at this point and thought he was going to wreck the dad here about how life works when he has no experience himself. So you can see the problems there. What happened when he had nothing to say and Dyrus was making all these great points? Basically, Reginald, the camera was off him, but if you look at the way Dyrus is looking at him, as far as I can tell, his strategy was just to stare Dyrus down, and Dyrus kept looking away awkwardly, which is, I mean, listen, psychologists could have a fucking field day with these videos if you ever could get someone in esports and pay him to break down what they think's going on. He never admitted he was wrong. He never suggested he could be wrong. He just moved on to the next topic. There was no more discussion of that. Then there was this section, okay, that he started like this. Shut up. I'm going to tell you what the problem is here. Well, fuck me, mate. That sounds like a great way to facilitate healthy discussion. between all the members of the team, right? Where the coach doesn't have to have the final authority. He just facilitates the discussion. We all figure it out together. Shut up, shut up. I'm going to tell you what the problem is here. The problem. Not, let's have a discussion. Here's something I think might be an issue. What do you think? What's your feedback? I mean, that's fucking sick discussion skills, mate. No wonder discussions are awesome when you have them. No one else is allowed to fucking have any say. And you're just right all the time. The problem with Reginald is he shuts down real discussion. And so as a result, when he's as bold as that and uses that sort of language, no one's going to say, like Thorin isn't going to be like, Jesus, shut the fuck up already and let me have a say. You know what you're talking about here? No, we shouldn't have done that. Like, look at the way the game went. So as a result, when no one does that, and then it even more promotes people not speaking up, and then he just gets to speak, people silently say, or just nod like, yeah, and I'll try to do better next game, Reggie. I'll see if I'll play more solo queue, try not to feed. Then he, even worse, the feedback fucking loop on him of like yes men, or even worse, people who just silently give consent when probably they don't even agree on a full level themselves. That makes him even think, nailed it. Just fucking coaching shit's easy, bro. You just tell him how it is. That's even worse. He's then thinking they all agree with him, that he was right on all these details. Even though we saw on some of the set details, actually people like Bjergsen and Dyrus, and even Thorin at times, could totally go in on him and wreck him on the in-game details. He would have been totally wrong there. That's not a healthy environment, and that's not going to help TSM going forwards, by the way. At least Loco, he was on the other end of the spectrum and almost bullied by the fucking players verbally, but at least Loco, they were allowed to have back and forth, and they were allowed to have some discussion and put their suggestions forward. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen in TSM discussions in this sense. I mean, that's the thing, if you talk about fucking Reginald's teams. Not only does he create this scenario of beaters and yes men and guys who just don't speak up, who are just silent and just take the beating, but even worse, because he's set this whole thing in place where he is their fucking boss, and he to a degree has helped them get all this money and had all the wonderful things in their life in some weird way, indirectly at least, always lead back to Reginald being in TSM. They then become, he's this sadistic fucking Ramsay Bolton-esque character, like I described before, just wrecking them because he can, just to be like, haha, I'm fucking with you just because I can, I'm Reginald. And even worse, they're not just like, oh, this is horrible, but I hope I can just survive this and then one day get out of it. Instead, they become these fucking Reek-esque creatures who are like, yes, Reggie, and I deserve it, and you are in many ways the Dalai Lama and a great human being, and I deserve all this because, you know, people don't know what a piece of shit I am, but by the grace of you, I shall be healed and walk again. Like, this is fucking gross, man. I'm so sick of seeing people like Dyrus get bullied in this. I don't care if Dyrus watches this, by the way, and comes out and says, no, Reginald is a good friend of mine and I am always deserving of beatings. Like, don't care, mate. If I see abuse, I'm going to call out for abuse. I don't like that. I find it quite disgusting, in fact. And that's bullying to me. So he shuts down those things. Reggie and Loco especially seem fucking obsessed with picks and builds. Because, by the way, it's the most easy results-orientated thing to just go back and go, since we lost, you shouldn't have built that item. You should have built this item. Not even asking him what was your decision-making at this point in the game. How much gold would you have needed to get to that? Would we have been forced into a team fight before that? That's why you bought the item earlier. Or you thought you were going to be dealing with a different person because there wasn't good communication. Ignore all that. Just you pressed the wrong button, idiot. Haha, I would have pressed the right button. Like, fucking great one, mate. Oh, next time I'll remember to press the right button. You haven't even explained the situations in which it would happen. The fucking picks one killed me. Like, yes, every game we lose, we had the wrong picks. Did we win? Haha, must have had the right picks. Like, this isn't even coaching, mate. That's like a little fucking kid trying to figure things out. What's interesting is they had these post interviews after all the discussions. So Reggie and Loco obsessed with the picks, the bans, and all that shit. What's funny is, they talk to Dyrus, he even counters all the shit they've just said. Remember the discussions where they were going back and forth? Dyrus never brought up the fact that he thought the picks were correct. He even says, like, I actually think these picks were fine and we could have won even with them if we played differently. So he's even not even agreeing with what they said about the fucking picks, where they all agreed they were wrong. Then they go through all these players, right? They come to Lost Boy. Lost Boy is by far the most experienced player on that team, including fucking Reginald, by the way, of playing really big games. Because he's played all those OGN seasons, he's played OGN playoffs every season except one. He's been to huge international tournaments. He's won huge international tournaments multiple times, by the way. WCG, he won IEM with them. He won IEM with Blaze. This guy's almost been and done it all to a degree. He's won MLGs. He's won OGNs. He has so much experience. And what does he go to? He doesn't talk about picks. He doesn't talk about builds. He doesn't talk about one person's mistake. He goes straight to the fact that he felt like they played poorly. They didn't identify what they were doing, as in they didn't understand what they were meant to be doing. He's nailed it. That's the problem. It's not even, yes, fix picks, fix builds, fix bans, fix overall structure, but fix like where is the communication breaking down? What exercises can we have to build that up? So now let's ask ourselves, since Loco's apparently being pushed aside, what the fuck is the role of LocoDoo now in this team? Because here's the problem. Is it strategy? Is it tactics? Then why do they always go on and on about their live-in analysts? Remember, the analyst is the one who comes up with data and maybe comes up with strategies and comes up with overall stuff. So what, Loco just has final say over that, but not anything else? Well, in that case, he gets to decide the strategies and tactics, but he can't implement them. Can't decide when they're implemented. He isn't even a guy who's known for strategical brilliance. And yet you're now going to give him that role, whereas his role, supposedly, I thought, was to be the coach, was to coach people, to train them, to make them practice in a certain way, to maintain the overall structure, to set people in position, to take tactics and strategies and picks and interesting information from the analysts and the experts, then to implement it himself. He's the implementer. Instead, he's now one of the guys coming up with that shit, and Reginald, who apparently doesn't fucking agree with him on half the shit, is going to be the one implementing it. Like, what is the point in his job here? Why is he in this team? I think he can be a good coach. I don't know if it's for TSM, it might turn out for a different sort of team, but why? What is the point in him being in this team right now? There's no explanation given of that, except like, I love him and trust him. Like, yeah, that's all fucking for the birds, mate. Give me some actual information about what he's going to do right in the team. This might sound harsh, because I don't mean the first part of this as a backhanded compliment. Loco's best quality, as far as I can tell, a very good quality that other people do not have and will never have, is being able to speak Korean and have pre-existing relationships with top Korean players and Korean coaches. Because what that allows him to do is to talk to those players and coaches and to keep in depth in the Korean scene and insert into it, not just watching OGN and having to reverse engineer things without even being able to know what a player thought about that, and get all this info and then bring it over to the West and try and apply it. Now, sometimes he forces it, like I think that's what he did with the Urgot and the Cho'Gath picks at MSI. Sometimes he misapplies it and misidentifies what type of team he has. But overall, it's great. It's essentially like a pipeline of this awesome information that other teams, a lot of them don't have, straight into TSM. And then he has Lost Boy and he has players like a Bjergsen who can implement some of this stuff. You remember the moment, this is what shows you one of the problems he has in terms of being a real coach, as in helping players improve, setting how we're going to get to accomplish our goals, implementation, integration of our ideas. It's the moment in TSM Legends where Loco, they're discussing the fact, as privately the analysts, Reggie and Loco, they're discussing the fact that their team fighting has degraded, it's gotten worse. And Loco says with a voice, with an air of exasperation, like he's at his wit's end, like, what do I do? He just says, but what do we do other than play scrims and talk about how we team fight? Think about this for a second. So they're having issues with their team fighting. It's gotten worse. And all Loco can think of is, right, what do we do? And then the implication is, because all we can do is play scrims and talk about how we team fight. That's not all you can do, mate. There's a whole field called coaching. And you know what coaching's all about? Taking big problems, figuring out how to solve them by breaking them into smaller parts, into their most constituent parts, and then working on those, then reattaching them, building them into each other, and eventually you get to a point where the machine, the overall process, can solve the problem. But you can't just do that from nowhere. You can't just talk about a team fight and the next game every aspect of the team fight is going to go right because you talked about it. No, you have to work on things. You have to drill certain things. This is coaching. You need specific drills that work on aspects of the team fighting that aren't working right now, where you practice with that in mind, that one goal in mind in these particular scrims against this sort of team that will give us the problems in that way. You have one player who knows in this game, for the next 5 games, I'm specifically practicing on this. I'm working in solo queue, I'm specifically practicing on this. I'm practicing with purpose here, specific purpose to fix a small part that will build into overall solving the problem. You set up 2-man teams where I know, like, my job here is to practice so that when he does this engage, I know to follow up on it. When I'm going to engage, I communicate in a certain way with the right teammate to engage on it. When I'm the last guy, I come in at the right sort of pace based on when the others will go in. I'm not too late, I'm not too early. These are the specific things you're working on separately, not just you work on them holistically as a team, like, well, you need to fix this, you need to fix that, you need to fix it all at once. In fact, in this book I have about, it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. It's about coaching tennis, and it makes this very good point that if you wanted to fix a tennis player's problems, you wouldn't go in and go, right, your serve needs problems here, and then when you return here, don't go to the backhand, try to run around it and hit an inside-out forehand. You wouldn't give him 50 things to fix. That will actually make him worse, even though you're helping him, telling him real things he needs to fix. What you do instead is you take one thing that he needs to fix, you break it down into a small thing, and you say, right, work on this small thing, and gradually he improves that. That then becomes part of his game. You work on another thing. Eventually, the big problems are taken care of themselves by taking care of the small things. It's like that famous saying, take care of the cents. The one unit of American currency, and the dollars take care of themselves. Because if you're very careful with all your cents and spend them wisely, you're not wasting dollars. That's the whole point. That's what you need to do in coaching. Have certain players who are having issues with something, a mechanic in the game or some concept strategically, play a specific champion which works on a weakness of that. Now maybe that's engaging, it's following up, that's zoning, positioning in team fights if he's a carry, bursting if he's a mid laner. Even if that champion isn't directly what he is going to play, it's the fact that it's training him to be able to think this way, to be able to identify when these situations happen and what the correct flowchart of decisions is. There's a famous example Monty gave on a really early episode of Summoning Insight, where he talked about a Korean coach who had this really aggressive AD carry. And he didn't mention who the coach was and who the player is, but you could probably figure out for yourself if you realize it's in early 2014. This player was way too aggressive as an AD carry. So what the coach did, even though he wasn't going to play this in most of the games, was get the player and constantly force him every time he was too aggressive to play Cogmore in lane. And the reason he was making him play this is because Cogmore doesn't have an escape. So if this guy played super aggressive, as was his overall approach, not just champion specific, he would get killed, he would get shown up, he would be doing shit. So it forced the player from playing so much Cogmore, he only got to play Cogmore, to learn how to be defensive, how to pick his spots. And then when he went back onto the other champion where he could have done those aggressive plays, he would now be more calculated in how he did it. He'd think before he just did it. He'd have a sense, a rhythm of when you can do it and when you can't do it, and when to play safe and when to understand the value of defensive play. These are the things that they need to do. When Reginald had that big breakdown where he went player by player, like, Lost Boy, I think your communication, you used to be like a player who makes stellar plays, but your communication has to improve. He went player by player on everything they had to improve. Was LocoDoo really not doing that? If he wasn't doing that, by the way, or he wasn't ever having these conversations even in private, fire him now. He's not a good coach. That is fucking coaching 101, mate. That's the most base level of coaching. Simple tips like that. Not big things, just minor stylistic things that we need this to be better in line. Again, to set the identity. And that's why you need final authority to ensure people carry that out. If he wasn't doing that, fire him. If he was doing that, again, what's so fucking wonderful what Reggie did? Was that supposed to just be a random scene there? Because it was set as if he was coming in like, now I'm going to fix things now. If that wasn't going on already, mate, it's fucking over. When you talk about LocoDoo's coaching, I made this point before in a video. In fact, I'll link it like there, and I'll maybe link it in the description as well. It was a video about how TSM rely on preparation. And what's funny is a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, idiots watch the video and were like, duh, every top team relies on preparation. Funny enough, that wasn't what the video wasn't like, sponsored by Alpha Draft, TSM relies on preparation. The end. Like, that wasn't the fucking video, believe it or not, that was the title. I went into a lot of detail as to why it was a specific type of preparation. The preparation they relied on was the preparation that happens between game 1 and game 2 of a series. Was when they lose, how they prepare for the next game. It actually wasn't long-term preparation. Well, that's what's funny, is that wasn't the style at all. And so when you go back under LocoDoo, every single time TSM is in a situation where they face an opponent in a best of X series or in like a group of an international type tournament, and they face them for the first time and they've had a chance, they knew who they were going to face, to do maximum prep, a week, a few days, a lot of time to get their prep squared away, where normally a top team would then be at their best because they've had the full prep time. The best teams excel in that scenario. TSM overwhelmingly failed. And what they would succeed in doing was eventually, after losing game 1, realizing what was totally wrong about that and knowing what to just toss out the window and how to then adapt and take something of that worked and tweak it to then work in game 2. That was the strength. And I actually made this point because it's a very unusual strength to have. It's actually a feather in LocoDoo's cap. He's terrible at that other prep. He's really good at making the mid-game adjustments, which actually in NBA is a big thing in series. Sometimes you don't win just on the prep and your idea. It's how you adjust between games, what little tweaks you make in terms of man matchups or the tempo you going to play at. So let's do this. I've written down the record of all these matches. In total, there were 19 situations where Loco played a team in the first game, where it was the first time playing them in that scenario, as in once you've reset and you've had a little break and you've had time to do the max prep. 19 occasions, and you're going to see how many times they fail. So his first split was the summer split of 2014. First round of the playoffs, they played Dignitas and they lost game 1. Same playoffs in the semi-finals, they played LMQ and they lost game 1. Finals, they played C9 and they lost game 1. They go to Worlds. First game of the group is against Starhorn Royal Club and they lose this game. Second game is against SK Gaming, where Gilius couldn't play, Svenskeren couldn't play. He was banned for 3 games, remember? So one of the stars of the team couldn't play. In comes Gilius, who isn't a particularly good player, as a sub who'd never even played with the team before. He just arrived and played a couple of days or something, or a week or something. And he had to play. Now, I wouldn't particularly count that, but we'll count that for the sake of it. They won this game. They won that game against SK. Then they played TPA, a team that actually, yeah, they're okay, but actually that's an expected win. But okay, again, we'll count it. They beat TPA, so they've won 2 there. In the World's quarterfinals, because remember, the second round robin, they've already had time to play them again. It's not exactly the same scenario. They've had time to adjust. It's almost like a series to a degree. It's a few days later. Now, when they come back for the quarterfinals, they play Samsung White and they lose their first game. They go home, IEM San Jose. New team, time to prep. They know they're playing Unicorns of Love most likely in the semis because it was unlikely Leon team or whoever the fuck was going to make it. So supposedly, they should have had time to prep for them. They lose the first game. IEM World Championship comes around. In the groups, it was a bracket stage, so we'll count it the same way. They play World Elite, they played CJ, time to prep for them. They know who they're going to play, most likely. They beat both of them, props. In the semi-finals, they play Yowie Flash Wolves. Admittedly, this one, I will also be fair, just as I was with the Gilius case and saying it shouldn't count really, but we will. We're going to count this, but they shouldn't count to a degree, because actually most of their prep was expecting SK and it was an overnight thing, and I can understand why you wouldn't have prep for them. But okay, they lose that, so we're counting them all, by the way. IEM World Championship. In the final now, they play World Elite and they win game 1. Now, admittedly, they win game 1 in very shaky fashion where they looked like they were going to lose and they clearly made some pick ban mistakes that they fixed for game 2. But actually, on paper, they did win it. They factually won this game. So they did win that even if it was close. Spring Split 2015. First round is the semi-finals. They lost the first game to Tip. In the final, they played C9. You remember in the series, they crushed them. They actually lost game 1. MSI. The first game they play, remember they know who they're playing in the group. They've had time to prep. They lose to Fnatic first game. They lose to SK. They lose to AHQ. They lose to EDG. The only team they beat at MSI was Besticus, and that was beyond expected. That was the easiest team of all the ones I've mentioned here. So I'm going to count them all, even the ones that I feel are unfair in favour of the team that SK is playing, and the ones that are unfair against the team that SK is playing. So 19 instances where they first played someone. And remember, playing World Elite in the final is different from playing them in the group because, again, there's been a full reset of days between and then you know that you're going to play them in the final. That's a different scenario. So in the situations where you've had the reset and you're playing them again with your prep, your built-up prep, not the between the games prep, in those scenarios, they have lost 13 out of 19, and that's including all the harsh ones. I'm not even talking about the World Elite one that was close in the final. Okay, let's take out the unfair one, shall we? So I'll take out as an unfair one when they lost to UE Flash Wolves. I'll take that off, make it into 12, okay? So they've lost 12 times, but now if you take out the Gilius, TPA and Besticus ones, that's 12 out of 16. So either the total stat is 13 out of 19, which is still really bad, or if you take out the unfair ones, the questionable ones, 12 out of 16. So 4 occasions out of 16, 1/4, you've actually lost out. Despite having this prep, and many times, in most of these cases, at least half, being the superior team actually, you still manage to lose. That shows that type of prep, LocoDoo, we have a track record over splits, over different opponents, different regions, different tournaments, different structures. He is a bad coach in this particular sense. That is just provable actually, that the stats are there. Now, the reason why that's worth making a point of is because, first of all, when the people were like, well, duh, every team benefits from practice. That's the point I was making, you fucking cretin. Most teams with that prep, the top teams win when they have that prep. That is overwhelmingly not a common problem for elite teams in any region. In fact, the majority of great teams and the best teams are front runners in the sense that they're so good they win the first game. They set the tempo, they set the meta within the series of what picks are going to be used and the other team has to react to them. They set the agenda of the style of how they will play and the other team is forced to respond to that and come up with something. TSM and Loco's TSMs are terrible at that. They do a really bad job of that. What he's really good at, and this is actually a quality that not many coaches are good at, by the way, especially not Western teams, is adapting from game 1 and then winning game 2 and then getting back into the series and figuring these things out. That is what he's very good at. So he clearly has some strengths as a coach, not just being able to speak Korean, have this pipeline into Korea, but this area he's got very good strengths in. I'd want him in my team to do that aspect. Now, I'd probably have someone else for the prep. Now, Reginald, by the way, isn't my first choice there. He wouldn't even fucking come to mind here. I don't know what basis he has to have done that ever. So in that sense, what this shows me, this track record, is that LocoDoo basically needs the other team to beat his team and show him what not to do. Once he knows what not to do, he can eliminate that from the equation, and he now has a sense within his things that he has practiced in our strats of what can work. So there we go. That's just a strengths and weaknesses breakdown of Loco. Now there's a section where Reggie talked about Bjergsen's attitude. So it goes like this. The section heading is regarding the Bjergsen attitude problem mentioned in the latest TSM Legends episode. So here's the long quote. Our whole team has a problem with playing from behind. When we fall behind in game, the team becomes really negative and the communication completely stops, which makes it even harder for the team to come back. I told Bjergsen specifically to fix this attitude because multiple members on the team look up to him and I expect him to be a role model for the other players. If he's more positive in game, then the other players will be as well. And this is an attitude problem that needs to be fixed by every player. I told this to Bjerg in the episode because I expect him to lead the change. Now, first and foremost, the first part of that, like they have a problem playing from behind. When they fall behind, the team becomes really negative and the communication stops, making it even harder for the team to come back. Now, there's actually an instance of this, which is when Bjergsen actually says he's arguing with Dyrus over whether he should have backed and they could have set up for a dragon fight instead. And Dyrus says like, well, we probably should have. And then Bjergsen's like, yeah, but you guys told me I could back then, and so I did. Right? Same problem Bjergsen's having there that LocoDoo had when he delegated his authority and then tried to blame someone else. You're the fucking shot caller, Bjergsen. It's your choice whether you back and do that. And you should know if you're the shot caller. Listen, I realize it's unfair to be a superstar mid laner and have to know this as well and keep your eye on the whole fucking map. But unfortunately, the shot caller has to know when we're going to set up for the draft. Your job is to be thinking of that and anticipating it, setting it up, telling the others what to do, when to back, when to do that. You're not able to do that off. You're the fucking shot caller. Likewise, if your team has a problem from behind and all the rest of it, sounds like Bjergsen has shot calling issues. Now, this is the problem, as a general principle, with having your star player be the shot caller if he is a traditional carry role. The stress and pressure of doing that anyway is incredibly high. Most players can't live up to that. Your player's doing it, and then he's trying to be a shot caller, and he's doing a decent job, not when they fall behind, of doing that. The team already lives and dies on Bjergsen fucking soloing certain games or just being the main carry in the other games. So of course he's going to have a hard time doing that and then instantly, simultaneously separating his individual feelings about how the game's going, what he wants to do, and going to a team approach and understanding overall what the team approach has to be and how to set that up. That's totally unrealistic. Put it this way, people will make sports examples of like how a sports star would deal with this. If Michael Jordan had been his coach, he would literally have done shit like this. He'd be scoring loads of buckets in a game they're losing, and he'd come to the bench and he'd say, I'm out there fucking putting up 30 and you're missing layups. By the way, you know why I know that? Because that's the kind of thing, if you've read books about him, that he did do. But he wasn't the coach. That's the key thing. He was just a player. Therefore, that was just mild subordination, and the coach could reassert and find a strategy to keep going. If MJ had been the coach there, Michael Jordan, that would have been a fucking nightmare. By the way, they wouldn't have won championships. They might have been really good. They might have still won games by him solo carrying. They wouldn't have had any of the team approach to do it, though. And doing that degraded his teammates' confidence. But luckily, because he wasn't the coach, it didn't ruin it completely. It could still be fixed by the coach and could still be attenuated. He used to literally do stuff like, there was a player on his team, Stacey Williams, who was on the original Bulls, by the way, that won the first 3 championships. And he would say stuff out loud on the bench when everyone was listening. If that guy was having a poor game rebounding, because he's a power forward, he would say, you know what you call a power forward without any rebounds? Small forward. Just degrade the whole guy's... This is like in games and on the bus after games. This is terrible attitude for leaders and for the in-game leader, especially in the shot caller. That's where you need other leaders. You need either a different person to be the shot caller, so Bjergsen is just a component within it, not overriding the whole thing, or you need emotional leaders. You need a coach who can take those players aside separately, and he can talk to all aspects of those players, the star and the role players. So he can take the star and he can explain, like Phil Jackson did with Michael Jordan, like, listen, you can't treat everyone on the team the same. They're not the same as you. They don't respond well to some of this stuff. They're not going to be able to do the things that you can do. They're not going to be respond to that behavior. And you know what? You need these guys. It's not just that they need you. You need these guys because you need them to play the best that they can and do what they're capable of contributing to activate your success, because it's the team success that's going to win you the championships, not just you playing that way. So you've got to figure out a way to be positive in that sense to get them on your side and to be able to help them play the way they can. Then you take the role players aside and you say, listen, I know that you guys need to be treated a little more softly, and I have to show you that, listen, ignore the negative aspects of what he's saying. He's just frustrated because you're not helping him out as a teammate. If you can play just do certain small things, not anything flashy, not even like what he's doing, you can earn his trust. You can show him that you play hard, that you want to win this game, that you're trying just as hard as he is, even if you're not as talented and as skilled, even if you're not owning in the game. And in doing so, this will help repair the relationship. You'd never get to that point if you just had the Jordan beration of the other guy, and the other guy like, oh, fuck this, I guess I am shit, or just like, fuck you, Michael Jordan. Like, that will never work. Telling Bjergsen, like, oh, by the way, I need you to change your attitude and be really positive and communicate well. Okay, do you get that? I expect that to be fixed for next week forever. That's not the way that works, Reginald. It's not the way that works, mate. That psychology doesn't work like that. And also, people don't just change things overnight like that, especially fundamental things about how their problem-solving tools and their decision-making in the world. I mean, what's he supposed to do? Like, they're like, Reginald tells me, like, can you fix it all and just, I've told you once, so please do that. Ah, okay, Reggie, yeah, I'll just reprogram my brain. Tank from the Matrix Tank, are you there? Yes, what do you need, Bjergsen? Load up leadership and shot calling positivity module. Are you okay, Bjergsen? I know leadership. Like, hit the techno. Like, what the fuck is this shit? That's such a naive way of thinking how the world works. Same as it's equally naive to be like, oh, and people like Dyrus and Santorin, who are like quite quiet guys, and Lost Boy, who only knows a little bit of English, just be really forceful and give your opinions, and speak a lot, and be willing to go back and forth with us all, even though that's totally contrary to your whole nature. And I haven't even really given you any tools as to how to do that. I've sort of gotten someone who's crippled and commanded them to walk, pretty much. What a ridiculous scenario. Bjergsen, Reginald quote, I wish there was a fucking Bjergsen speech. Please, 17-page link article when you leave TSM. Tell you what, that Reflections is going to be dynamite. I'll tell you, boys, just fingers crossed. I do see how because of the way the conversation was cut, people may have gotten the wrong idea. Okay, we've got to give him credit for that. It is a fucking reality TV show. We have no idea what hit the cutting room floor. Another quote. I do mean what I said on Twitter. Outside of the game, Bjergsen has the best attitude for a player that's constantly trying to improve. These are really his words, by the way. I'm not making these sound idiotic. Like, these are really the way he wrote it. But anyway, I think we can vaguely understand what he's meaning there. So does Bjergsen have the best attitude? He even said the best attitude in the league. Like, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. You don't even fucking know half the other players. You definitely don't know their dynamics in game. And I'm sorry, I don't think that some of those other players who are really actually... Some of them have very reasonable opinions. Is everyone else is toxic except Bjerger. He is a good guy and the best. Like, he deserves Challenger Medal for Honor. Like, whatever, mate. So let's address that statement. Is he the best? Does he have the best attitude for a player trying to improve? Okay, individually, I actually think, yeah. To a degree, I really like his attitude trying to improve. You know why? Because I can see the fucking results. I can see how he's improved. I can see how he's even embraced being the main carry. I can see how he's not let that get them down, and he can now do it on an everyday basis against every type of opponent and not let them shut him down when he's being focused all the time, and know that, yes, the whole game's on his fucking stick, but he's going to score that puck in the top. We're going to put it right off the pipe inside. Top draw, I think they call it in hockey. Yeah, he's great at that. And he's even then embraced doing the shot calling, and he's gotten good at it, and he's even trying to figure out how to work with LocoDoo. Apparently has fucking counter ideas to him at times and make that system work. I agree, he's doing all that individually in a great way. In terms of trying to succeed and not giving up, again, I agree. He's doing a fucking killer job for a Westerner. The best in NA. Team-wise, no, but it's understandable because, again, so much of the time the team does fail him. The team concept does break down. Even LocoDoo's approach isn't correct, and it comes down to Bjergsen again, like, oh, guess it's time for me to card carry another fucking game and series. Remember that famous joke when Inven reacted to the summer split of 2014 when TSM won through the playoffs in that epic run where they were 1-3 against 3-1 against Dignitas, then 3-2 against LMQ, then 3-2 against C9, and as I've told you, they lost the first game in every series. They were down 1-2 in LMQ, down 1-2 against C9. But you know, one of the best comments on Inven was it just said, like, Bjergsen looked like an older sibling trying to lead his brothers or something like that. Like, that's what it was like. It was like Bjergsen literally had to be like, I know you guys are all lost and afraid, and you know what the fuck's going to happen. Get on my fucking back, and I'm Maximus. I'll carry us through this motherfucker. Like when Maximus actually got the Carthaginians to beat Rome in that recreation in the Colosseum that day. You remember that movie? Good movie, right? Reginald's never seen it. So, team-wise, no. But again, it's understandable to a degree. I can understand that. In terms of his behaviour to the coach, definitely not But that's his own fault to a minor degree because he's not making it clear that this is the wrong coach for him. Apparently he can't even break into that paradigm, pop that little bubble because he's in fucking TSM land, isn't he? So that you're not even allowed to think that. That is verboten. This is like fucking 1984 some shit. They've deleted words and concepts and paradigms from reality itself. So the only reality is that Loco is the coach, and you can never be like, well, maybe he's the wrong coach for me. That's why I disagree all the time. No, we're both wrong, even though I don't totally agree and think sort of he's an idiot. Like, okay, mate, whatever you say. Another Reginald quote. This is almost finished, by the way. Even though Loco has made some mistakes with coaching TSM, he's actively trying to fix his issues and become a better coach. Everyone on the team is working towards one goal, improving. I believe Loco will learn from this experience and he'll be a better coach for it in the future. But right now, the system that we have in place isn't working, and I'm going to take an active role in fixing the issues instead of waiting around for them to be fixed. Okay, so you're going to do a band-aid fix. You're not actually going to prevent these issues from happening. And in fact, even worse, you are actively going to prevent the person you still want as your coach from learning now how to fix these problems and fixing them. The idea that you can fix these in off-season matters is very naive. You can see why people have to change things during the season. You're literally preventing him from fixing them and from improving, as you think he can, into a coach that could fix them. I'm not even sure if he could. Maybe he's the wrong coach for that team. Don't mistake, by the way, when this is all coming up, because I could actually see TSM still winning some games. So do not mistake if they win these games. Reginald, let me think. Don't mistake him getting to have a final say in a way Loco never did, because he gives himself the authority, as the final say, A, being correct, and B, being different from what I described before. Reginald was a shot caller, where it worked to a degree in NA, because for all following the bad plan, all buying into the system and there being the authority means that you have a better approach than even what seemed like correct decisions disparately, which is what we had before with TSM. So yeah, it could be better in that respect, but it's still not going to fix the aspect of it's not good coaching. It won't be the right approach overall. It won't be the best approach, mainly because I don't think Reginald's a proper coach. Anyway, with that said, imagine a world in which they do get it together and they qualify for Worlds, whatever spot, even third place. With this approach, where they don't have a space to improve, they don't have a proper coaching place, they don't have a structure, and they're not going to be building on anything, they will be fucked for Worlds. It's also a case that this approach is not guaranteed to work. This is actually even more risky in a way than using LocoDoo already, because if you just gave LocoDoo authority, maybe you could even fix a couple of things, and you're already close anyway, you're tied for third. Maybe now, we have to accept this possibility. It's possible, hey, maybe they don't even make Worlds. That's a real possibility. I don't know because of the circuit points. I imagine they probably do anyway, but hey, maybe it's even possible not to. There's the part where Reginald literally explains that, like, I'm going to become the coach now because I think that, like, I could just become a really good coach. And he even uses the phrase really fast. That is ludicrous. What is the ego of this person? Not just that he's going to be a band-aid fix, that he's going to help them now and it's going to help a little bit. He's going to become a really good coach right now. Oh, wait a minute, mate. You haven't been in Korea for 15 years playing StarCraft, have you? I thought that was the problem, right? Don't compare those coaches. But you're going to become a really good coach really right now, really fast. On what basis? And why do people buy into this? Who is this guy? He's not the fucking Dalai Lama. He's not some savior. He's not the fucking... What even is that term? I can't remember. There's another famous term along those lines that's like ridiculous like that. Maitreya. He's not the world savior that's going to do all this shit, is he? You guys make out like he is. Oh, if he says he's going to be a good coach, he must do, because he's Reggie. You know, he made a good choice getting Bjergsen. What does that have to do with coaching? There's fucking nothing to do with it. Now then, their recent form, remember, lost to TDK, close game. Beat TDK in a close game, rather. Beat them. Lost to Gravity, top team in the league now. Lost to Teammate, admittedly not a good team in the league, like 6th or 7th or something. And then lost to Liquid, who's like the second best team now or something. Here's the next 4 games. First thing to consider here is that the schedule of the last 4 games means that actually they probably will go better than 1-3. They'll probably go 2-1, 2-2, or 3-1 if anything, because they're going to play Tip. Okay, Tip's tied with them for third. Fair enough. They can lose that one. That's fair enough if that happens. Still possible to win, by the way. It's probably 50-50. Let's say they lose that one, though, so they lose that one. Then they play Dignitas. Yes, Dignitas was the spoiler before. Dignitas has fallen off completely. They're in 6th place now. That should be a win for TSM. Not a massive win, 60-40, 70-30. That should be a win for them. So let's go 1-1 at least here. C9 are tied for 8th place, having huge issues. That should definitely be a win. they would go 2-1 already. We've already got 2 games won. We've already beaten last week. Last game, NME tied for 8th place. Completely fallen off. That should definitely be a win. We're now 3-1. If not, it's possible to go 4-0 without even doing massive drastic changes. So again, also, don't assume if they win these games that means Reginald was the great coach, he learned really fast, Loco was totally wrong, and everything's fine. Do not fall into his trap of using results-orientated thinking. You have to look, even in losses, or rather the other way around, even in wins, you have to look and go, was this the right way to play? Were they improving? Did they do things fundamentally correct? Because you have to imagine that team that just won that game had played the same game against SK Telecom in that sort of a scenario. Would they have won that? That's the way you have to think if you want to be a top-level World Championship team at one point. So anyway, you can see there was lots of different areas you went into. There was the Loco issue, the Bjerg issue, the Reggie issue, the total team approach, coaching as a concept, how you implement a coach, discussions, what makes them healthy discussions, what the role of a coach is within discussions, ego of players. I think there's a lot to cover there. I definitely don't think Reginald's wrong on all of it. I try to give him credit where I can. I don't think Loco is a bad coach. I definitely don't think he's no chance of being a good coach. I think there's obvious problems in all aspects of this. So the idea that Reggie's got it all figured out, to me, is pretty ridiculous. And I think him stepping in now, in the long run, is a mistake, even though it's definitely possible they can win these games.